Thanks for your company. I'm Bernice Abubeidulansa. We are coming to you live from digital address GA0992539. Also live on DSTV channel 421 and GoTV channel 144. The details now. NDC MPs are outperforming their colleague NPP MPs. This is one of the findings of the latest opinion poll conducted by senior lecturers of the Political Science Department of the University of Ghana, Legon. The report, as we said, is an opinion poll and therefore is unable to give probably what you may call enough reasons accounting for this finding. I'll furnish you with details of that particular report. But speaking on the AM show this morning, MP for North Tongue, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, argued that the finding on the poor performance of NPP MPs is indicative of the non-performance of the Akufo-Addo-led administration. While Rashid Draman is Executive Director of the Center for Parliamentary Affairs, and he's joining us via Skype. Thank you, sir, for joining the conversation this morning.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, what's your reaction to this opinion poll conducted by the University of Ghana?
I think what I see in the report is not surprising. It's a confirmation of, I believe, what we know already happening in our country, but also a confirmation of what pertains across the continent. If you compare this report to, for instance, a report that was put out by the Interparliamentary Union, which is based in Geneva in Switzerland, which regroups all parliaments around the world, you will find some parallels and some similarities in terms of the expectations of citizens vis-a-vis what MPs should be doing.
So, Mr. Draman, we'll go into the details later. You speak about the expectations of citizens, and one of those expectations in this report has to do with MPs visiting their constituencies. A lot of the constituents are not satisfied with what they're seeing. But what would you say, especially with regards to the assertion by the MP for North Tongue, Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa, that the president's performance may be reflecting what people perceive of their NPP MPs?
No, I think I would want to respectfully disagree with the position taken by the honorable member. I believe over the years, maybe you can do your check, generally members of parliament from the opposition parties mostly seem to be more active than members of parliament from ruling parties. I think for very obvious reasons. I mean, they are a government in waiting. They want to wrestle power from those who hold power currently. I mean, all those things play into the fact that they would normally be seen to be quite active in their parliamentary activism than those who hold power. So maybe that might be the explanatory factor. I don't think that the performance of the president has anything to do with this.
Another thing the opinion poll discovered was regarding new MPs. And the poll suggested that many of them are likely to lose their seats again if elections were held now. We've had this conversation over time, and some MPs are concerned that when we begin every government with fresh or a large number of MPs being new, then they now have to acquaint themselves with parliamentary proceedings and how parliament works. And before you realize, they've gone about 2 years already into the government, and there's always a bit of a drawback when we have large number of MPs being new ones. What would you like to say with regards to that particular finding?
Well, I think that we cannot do anything about that. I mean, across the continent, averagely, the turnover rate after elections, I mean, hovers around 50%. Recently, the elections that were held in Sierra Leone, about 80% of MPs lost their seat. So you have only 20% of all MPs coming back. In our country, over the years, it has been around average of 50%, which generally I believe is not bad. I mean, compared to the African average. I mean, we all have choices to make, and that nobody can impose on voters. I don't think maybe there's very much that can be done in this regard, except to say perhaps MPs would have to up their game. If you want to be re-elected, I think you need to pay attention to what would get you re-elected, or what would take citizens and what would take your constituents in terms of renewing your mandate. I mean, as the report shows, and confirmed by what we know around the continent, you can speak the best language on the floor of the House. You can be very active in terms of all the other functions. I think if your representational role is not prominent and is not effective, then citizens have a different view altogether. And unfortunately, I mean, that's the reality. And I think it's mainly, and that is what I want us to focus on. I mean, what are the root causes of the kind of data that we are seeing? And I think it goes to the structure of our economy, our station as a country in the process of development. Why is it that, for instance, if you do the same survey in the UK or in Canada, you are going to hear citizens say, you know, we are not asking for MPs to come and build hospitals for us, build roads, give us clinics and so on. What we are going to be asking MPs to be doing is to, I mean, ensure there is change in policy, ensure they hold the government to account and so on. And it's because of the fact that these people have gone beyond bread and butter issues. Now, in our country, we are still dealing with bread and butter issues. So when somebody doesn't have a place to sleep, when somebody doesn't have access to good health care and so on, it's very easy to be swayed by a potential candidate who wants to go to parliament, who comes to say, I'm going to do A, B, C, D. And then in most instances, you get people buying into this only to realize after the person has gotten elected that that is not the mandate of the MP.
And I was coming to that, so, Mr. Draman, because in the reports that we've received, there's a subsection on constituents' understanding of the role of their MPs. And I'm just going to run you through what the data says. For example, some of them see their MPs as developmental advocates. Some of them see them as having a role to rural development. And so you're looking at decentralization and the fact that we have assembly members, MCEs, DCEs. And the question really is, do you see that Ghanaians or constituents really understand what the MP's role is?
No, I think there isn't a proper understanding. And I think there isn't a proper understanding. And I think that is where, for instance, I mean, the groups like the NCC and other governance institutions, national governance institutions have a role to play in terms of educating citizens. But you can educate citizens all you want. If the structure of our economy doesn't change, if people's bread and butter needs are not properly addressed, I think it's going to be quite difficult, because if somebody is illiterate in my village, I mean, he or she will not have a very good understanding, even if a lot of education is provided. So my point is going back to the fundamentals and making sure that if these things have to change, then we have to make a significant progress in terms of the structure of our economy. I mean, the big middle class and so on, so that no politician can take us for granted. No politician can come and tell us the things that are not within the purview of their role and their function. But currently, as we have it, I mean, high levels of illiteracy, high levels of joblessness and so on, and sometimes hopelessness. You combine all these things together, then you have people relying on hope and relying on maybe the stories and the promises that some politician is going to make to them, that they can deliver things that they themselves haven't finished understanding.
So while civil society organizations like Odikro are focusing on absenteeism in Parliament and asking MPs to come to Parliament and do what is required of them, constituents are complaining of absenteeism in their towns and communities. So the report, for example, some respondents said they hated that their MPs were not accessible, they don't visit them, they don't come, as often as they would want to see them. Aren't we putting too much burden on these members of Parliament?
I think I agree with you on that. For instance, I've been a very strong advocate of the fact that we need to provide members of Parliament the right and the needed resources for them to do their work. Up until this point, members of Parliament take loans to buy their cars, and they use those cars to go to their constituencies. They have usually the weekends and Mondays, they don't sit. So these are times that, for instance, it is assumed that they will spend in their constituencies, and then when they are on recess. But fundamentally, representation time is not properly defined and it's not properly monitored. So when, for instance, you don't show up in the House, it is very clear. I mean, there is a roll call and there is attendance and so on. But when you don't show up in the constituency, there are no sanctions, except maybe citizens would have to wait the next 4 years and so on. In some countries, time in the constituency is clearly defined in their standing orders, in the constitution and so on, so that there are times when MPs compulsorily have to be in the constituencies, and there are consequences for not doing that. In our country, as well as many other countries, that is not clearly defined. So oversight is defined, lawmaking is defined. They show up in the House, they have to do the work and so on. If they didn't show up, it's clear and there are consequences. But representation is not properly defined in our standing orders. I mean, it's just perhaps maybe a sweeping statement. They have to spend time in the constituency. How, for instance, you mentioned the fact that they don't have offices in the constituencies, so their houses are turned into their offices. That's a huge challenge. Our late President Mills, if I remember correctly, once promised that by the end of his tenure, each constituency is going to have an office for every MP. If you go around the country right now, I don't think even 5% of MPs have offices in their constituencies. So their houses are turned into their offices and so on. In some countries, if you go to Southern Africa, for instance, in Zambia, in Botswana, and in Namibia and other places, each constituency has an office. And these offices were built through the resources of Parliament over the years, step by step. In our country, I think it's always a lot of talk and nothing is being done. If over the years, I mean, Parliament, for instance, has maybe taken up an initiative of, let's say, creating constituencies, offices every year. Maybe we take one region, we build our offices. Another year, we take another region, build offices. I think by now we should have had constituency offices, and that would improve the representation role of the MP. I mean, there are structures. People know where to go. People know where to find the MP, even if it is not there, he or she is not there. There are officials in that office that can answer to the needs of constituents and pass that information to members of Parliament. We don't have that. So structurally, we are deficient in terms of how we enhance representation. And all these combine to create the impression that the MP is not doing his or her representational work very well.
All right. Finally, Doc, when people were asked if they were able to communicate with their MPs across the constituencies, 31.5% said yes, and 59.6% said no. We understand MPs must represent the people, so they speak the minds of their people in Parliament on issues, on bills being considered, etc. So we can't deny the fact that, you know, constituents need to have a say and able to communicate with their MPs. So how do we work around that so that you don't have an MP speaking his own mind, but indeed representing the people who voted for him?
I think the way to get around this again goes back to if we have structures in the constituencies where constituents can go to and say, okay, if I'm looking for my MP, this is a number at which I can reach him or her. Currently, as it stands, I mean, you have to be privileged, or you have to have somebody who can maybe link you to the MP. You show up in his house, if you are not known, it's very likely that he or she will not see you, and then you might not even have a number through which you can communicate with him. Today, with social media, with WhatsApp, with text messages, and almost everybody has a phone. Even in my village, I mean, people have internet and so on that they can easily communicate. So if we had an office in each constituency and citizens can go to that office, they can communicate through the officials who are there, and that information will reach the MP. They can have numbers through which they can reach the MP, and I think this would help. But if we leave things as they are, I think we are going to continue to see this challenge year in, year out.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Dr. Rashid Rahman is Executive Director of the Center for Parliamentary Affairs, and we've been discussing a recent opinion poll on the performance or perception that constituents have of their MPs.